Hey guys, tonight, we are going somewhere wide, dark, and rather lonely. Forget, for a little while, the neat picture of the American frontier, the tidy cabins, the brave cavalrymen, the distant campfires glowing beneath a friendly moon. The real plains could be colder, stranger, and much quieter than that. And sometimes, the safest sound in the darkness was the howl of a wolf. If you enjoy these slow journeys into the forgotten corners of history, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from tonight. For now, dim the lights, get comfortable, pull the blanket a little higher, and let the room around you grow quiet, because you're about to wake beneath an enormous sky. Congratulations. It is the middle of the 19th century, and you are sleeping on the southern Great Plains. There is no ceiling above you. There is no locked door. There is certainly no warm glass window separating you from whatever happens to be wandering outside. There is only buffalo hide, grass, darkness, and wind. You lie inside a Comanche teepee, somewhere in the vast territory outsiders will come to call the Comancheria. It stretches across an astonishing portion of the southern plains, through lands that will one day become Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas. But those borders do not exist for you. There are no painted lines across this country. There is the river, there is the canyon, there is the grass, there are the buffalo, and there are places where water can still be found when the earth has turned brown beneath the summer sun. Those are the boundaries that matter. Outside your tipi, the night wind brushes through the grass with a dry whisper. Then you hear it, a wolf. The howl begins somewhere beyond the camp, low and distant. Another answers, then another. If you have arrived here carrying the fears of a later age, this is probably the moment when you stop feeling sleepy. A thin wall of buffalo hide suddenly seems inadequate. You imagine teeth. You imagine yellow eyes. You imagine some enormous grey shape pushing its nose beneath the edge of the teepee while you lie helpless beneath a robe. Yet the people sleeping around you do not leap from their beds. No one screams. No warrior rushes outside waving a weapon at the darkness. The wolves continue howling, and the camp continues sleeping. That is your first lesson. The wolf is not necessarily the thing you should fear. The silence might be worse. For generations, Comanche people have lived in close observation of the animals sharing these plains. Buffalo provide food, hides, tools, shelter, and countless materials necessary for daily life. Horses provide movement, wealth, hunting power, and military strength. Wolves belong to this world as well. They follow buffalo. They travel through familiar hunting country. They call across distances that human voices cannot easily cross. A person who has spent a lifetime listening can learn that the sounds of animals are not merely background noise, they are information. Tonight, the wolves sound ordinary, but matters. Their calls drift through the darkness in familiar patterns. Somewhere beyond the camp, a pack is moving through its nightly world, perhaps following the scent of buffalo or communicating across the open country. You do not need to see them, in fact, you probably will not. You only need to hear that the world beyond the teepee is behaving as expected. Closer to you comes another sound. A horse exhales. It is a heavy, warm sound, followed by the faint movement of a hoof against the ground. Your best horse is nearby. Very nearby. For a Comanche warrior, a valuable horse is far too important to leave carelessly beyond reach. Horses mean far more than transportation. A skilled rider and a trained mount become an extraordinarily effective partnership on the plains. Children learn to ride young. By adulthood, experienced riders can perform feats that astonish outsiders, controlling horses at speed, shifting their bodies along the animal's side, hunting buffalo at close range, and fighting from horseback with remarkable confidence. But tonight your horse has a quieter job. It is listening. Its ears can catch sounds that pass unnoticed by you. Its nose can discover unfamiliar scents drifting through the night air. Its body can react to danger before your sleepy mind understands that anything has changed. You hear another small movement. Your eyes open. For a moment, you remain still. Nothing. The horse settles. The wolves continue in the distance. Someone coughs inside another teepee. A dog moves through the camp, its paws soft against the earth. Then quiet returns. You close your eyes. This is not careless sleep. It is sleep built upon familiarity. Every ordinary sound tells you something. The horses are calm, the dogs are calm, the wolves are behaving normally. The night itself seems calm, and that is important because danger here rarely announces itself politely. A rival war party does not approach carrying lanterns. A horse thief does not call from the darkness to explain his intentions. Movement across the plains can happen quickly and quietly. So survival depends partly upon noticing when familiar patterns change. Perhaps a dog suddenly begins barking toward the north. Perhaps several horses raise their heads together. Perhaps a distant pack of wolves becomes strangely quiet. One small change may mean nothing. Several changes at once deserve attention. This knowledge does not come from a handbook. It is learned by living here, night after night, season after season. A child grows up hearing adults discuss where animals moved, where water remained, what direction the wind changed, where buffalo were last seen, and what disturbed the horses before dawn. Knowledge accumulates quietly. Your grandfather noticed something. Your father remembered it. Now you sleep with that memory. The result is something outsiders often misunderstand. From a distant settlement, the plains can appear empty. To you, they are crowded with signs. Bent grass can tell a story. Tracks beside water can tell another. Birds rising suddenly from the ground may reveal movement. A nervous horse may detect what your eyes cannot. And wolves calling beyond the firelight can become part of the great living pattern surrounding the camp. This is why sleeping here does not mean separating yourself from the wilderness. There is no real separation. Your shelter is made from the animals of the plains. Your food comes from them. Your movement depends upon them. Your safety is partly announced by them. Even the darkness is something you learn to read. And slowly lying beneath the hide of the tipi, you begin to understand the strange reversal at the heart of tonight's story. A newcomer hears wolves and thinks, danger. An experienced person hears wolves and asks, what are they telling me? The difference is small. But on the Comancheria, small differences can keep a sleeping person alive. Outside, another long howl travels across the prairie. Your horse does not move. The dogs remain quiet. No hurried footsteps cross the camp. So you pull the robe closer. The wind continues through the grass, and surrounded by animals that would terrify many travelers, you begin to fall asleep. Because tonight, the wolves are still speaking. And for now, that means the darkness is behaving exactly as it should. The darkness around you is not empty. That is perhaps the second thing you must learn. To unfamiliar eyes, the southern plains can look almost unfinished. Grass stretches toward the horizon. Low hills rise and disappear. Creeks hide inside shallow cuts in the earth. In some places, there are so few trees that a traveler can ride for hours without finding enough shade to escape the afternoon sun. At night, all that openness becomes something stranger. The horizon disappears. Distances become difficult to judge. A sound that seems close may come from miles away, while something genuinely close may move almost without sound. Yet you are not alone in trying to understand it. Around the sleeping camp, hundreds of ears are listening. Some belong to people, many do not. Your horse shifts again beside the teepee. This time, you listen carefully. There is a soft pull from outside, then the quiet scrape of a hoof. Nothing follows. No snort, no sudden stamping, no chorus of barking dogs. So you remain beneath your robe. The ability to distinguish ordinary movement from meaningful movement is one of those skills that sounds simple until your life depends upon it. A nervous newcomer might wake at every noise. A careless person might ignore all of them. Neither response is useful. What matters is knowing the difference. The Comanche have spent generations learning those differences. Their homeland is not defended by stone walls. There are no castle towers standing over the prairie. No wooden palisade follows the moving camp from one hunting ground to another. Mobility itself provides protection. A camp can exist beside a creek tonight and be gone tomorrow. Tippies can be taken down, possessions can be packed, horses can be gathered, families can move. When necessary, An entire community can seem to dissolve into a landscape so large that an enemy may struggle simply to discover which direction it has gone. But mobility creates its own problem. If you do not have walls, you must notice danger before danger reaches you. And so the camp becomes a living arrangement of people, horses, dogs, terrain, memory, and habit. There is no single alarm, there are many. Imagine that somewhere far beyond the camp, another group of riders is moving through the night. You cannot see them. Perhaps they are enemies. Perhaps they are hunters. Perhaps they are travelers with no intention of coming anywhere near you. At first, their presence means nothing. Then the wind carries their scent. A horse at the edge of the herd raises its head. Its ears turn. Another horse notices. Then another. The change moves through the animals before a human being has seen anything at all. A young man watching the herd notices the shift. He does not immediately shout. That would be foolish. Instead, he watches. The horses are looking toward the same patch of darkness. Now a dog notices something. It pauses. Its head rises. Perhaps it gives a short bark. Inside the camp, someone wakes. The difference between peaceful sleep and sudden readiness may be only a few moments. That is why the animals matter so much. A human sentry has weaknesses. He becomes tired. His attention wanders. His eyes struggle in darkness. Cold makes him miserable. Warmth makes him sleepy. And anyone who has ever attempted to remain alert through the deepest hours before dawn knows that the human mind can become remarkably persuasive when it wants another few minutes of rest. A horse does not need to understand military discipline. A dog does not need to understand warfare. They simply react. This creates layers of warning around the people sleeping inside. The farther from the center of camp a disturbance is detected, the more time there may be to understand it. Time to wake, time to listen, time to gather weapons, time to determine whether the sound is actually dangerous. And, when necessary, time to leave. For a people whose strength depends heavily upon movement, those minutes can matter more than walls. You hear the wolves again. Their voices roll across the plains. One begins, another answers from farther away. Perhaps there are more beyond the reach of your hearing. The sound does not tell you exactly where every animal is standing, nor does it function like some perfect code in which every howl has a simple human translation. Nature is rarely that convenient. What matters is pattern, familiarity. A person who knows this country understands how animals normally behave. That makes unusual behavior easier to notice. The same principle guides countless small decisions during the day. Birds can reveal water. Scavengers can reveal a carcass. Tracks can reveal recent movement. Buffalo themselves shape travel because the Comanche economy, diet, and seasonal movements are deeply connected to the great herds. Wolves follow many of those same animals. So the presence of wolves is woven into the same landscape of information. There is also something deeper here. For Comanche people, animals are not simply pieces of scenery waiting to be classified. The spiritual world is intensely personal. Power can be associated with visions, experiences, and relationships with the forces surrounding human life. The concept often rendered as puha describes a kind of spiritual power present in the world. A person might seek spiritual guidance through fasting and solitude. Animals appearing in visions could carry profound meaning. The wolf, with its endurance, intelligence, cooperation, and ability to survive across the plains, could therefore possess significance far beyond the practical fact that it hunted buffalo. This does not mean every Comanche person thinks exactly the same thing about every wolf. There is no need to flatten an entire people into one belief. Personal spiritual experience matters. Different bands, families, and individuals carry their own knowledge and traditions. But the larger idea is important. The world around you is alive with meaning, and that changes the emotional shape of the darkness. You do not necessarily lie awake imagining nature as an enemy waiting beyond the fire. You are part of that nature. You hunt within it. You travel through it. You watch it. You learn its moods. Sometimes it kills. Sometimes it protects. Usually it simply continues being what it is. A wolf does not need to love you to be useful. It does not need to obey you. It does not even need to know you are listening. Its behavior can still tell you something. And this is where the story becomes quieter than the legends told later. The Comanche reputation among neighboring settlements, colonial authorities, Mexican communities, and United States soldiers becomes associated with speed and violence. Raids become famous, mounted warfare becomes famous, the extraordinary horsemanship becomes famous. Those things are dramatic, so they survive easily in stories, but none of them fully explains how people remain powerful across such enormous territory. Victory is not only what happens when arrows fly, power is also knowing where to camp. It is finding water. It is keeping horses alive through winter. It is recognizing tracks. It is understanding which canyon gives shelter from a northern wind. It is knowing when a distant sound belongs and when it does not. And occasionally, it is simply getting enough sleep to ride again tomorrow. That last detail is easy to overlook. You cannot remain alert forever. A warrior who wakes at every harmless howl eventually becomes exhausted. A camp that panics whenever a dog barks cannot function. Security requires trust in familiar patterns. So you learn which noises deserve your attention. Tonight, the wolves do not. They continue calling beyond the camp. Your horse remains quiet, the herd remains settled, and somewhere nearby a dog curls into the grass. The fire has burned low now. Only a dull orange glow remains beneath a skin of ash. You can smell smoke inside the tipi, mixed with hide earth and the faint scent of the animals outside. The temperature has fallen. The warmth beneath your robe feels heavier and more pleasant. You listen. Wind, grass, a horse breathing, a distant wolf, nothing unusual. Your eyes close again, hours pass. Then, sometime before dawn, the world changes. It begins with the horses. Not panic, not yet. A few animals become restless. Heads rise in the darkness. Ears point towards something beyond the camp. A sentry notices. A dog stands. For a few moments, there is only uncertainty. Then the dog gives a bark. Another answers. Your eyes open. This time you do not immediately close them. Outside, your horse has become tense. Its breathing is different. You rise around you. Other people are waking. No one needs a bell. No one needs a shouted command to explain that the pattern has changed. The living alarm around the camp has already done that. Perhaps the disturbance proves harmless. A wandering animal. A small group returning late. Something carried strangely by the wind. Or perhaps there really are riders beyond the darkness. Either way, you're awake before they reach you. And now you understand the real secret. The Comanche warrior does not sleep safely because wolves somehow guard his tipi like trained dogs. The wolves are not servants. The horses are not machines. The prairie itself is not a fortress. Safety comes from understanding relationships between all of them. One animal reacts, another notices, a human interprets, the camp responds. Knowledge fills the spaces where walls would otherwise stand. And when dawn finally begins to spread a pale band across the eastern horizon, you step outside into the cold air. The danger, if there was danger at all, has passed. Your horse stands beside you. Its coat is faintly silver beneath the first morning light. Farther away, the herd begins to stir. The wolves have stopped calling. Soon people will prepare for another day of movement, hunting, work, conversation, and travel across a country that seems empty only to those who do not know how to read it. You look toward the distant grass. Nothing moves there now, and perhaps that is the quiet realization worth carrying with you. To survive the Comancheria, you do not need to control everything around you. You need to notice it. You need to understand what belongs. And you need to recognize the moment when something no longer does. The wolf in the darkness is frightening only when you do not understand the darkness. Once you learn to listen, its howl can become something entirely different. Not comfort. Exactly. Not friendship, but information. And on a cold night beneath the enormous plains sky, information can be almost as valuable as fire. Now, as morning settles over the camp, your attention turns toward the animal standing only a few steps from where you slept. Because if the wolves help you understand the world beyond the camp, your horse will tell you what happens much closer to home. And the bond between a Comanche warrior and that horse is about to make sleeping on the open prairie seem far less reckless than it first appeared. Let us leave the distant wolves behind for a while and move closer to the quiet breathing just outside your teepee. Morning has not fully arrived. The eastern sky is only beginning to pale, and the grass beyond the camp still lies beneath a blue-gray darkness. Somewhere, a bird gives a short call. A dog stretches near the remains of a fire. The wolves that accompanied you through the night have fallen silent, but your horse is awake. It has probably been awake many times while you slept. You step outside and find it where you left it, close enough to the teepee that you could have reached it within moments for a Comanche warrior. This animal is not simply transportation, it is wealth, it is freedom. It is military power, and during the night it can become something remarkably close to an alarm. To understand why, you have to understand how completely horses transformed life on the southern plains. The ancestors of the Comanche had not always lived as the famous mounted people later remembered by Spanish, Mexican, Texan, and American observers. Horses of European origin spread northward through indigenous trade, capture, and exchange after Spanish colonization. The change was enormous. A person on foot can carry only so much. A person with horses can move a household. A hunter on foot approaches buffalo differently from a hunter riding beside a running herd. A war party on foot has one range, a mounted war party has another, and a family that owns many horses possesses a form of wealth that can move, reproduce, carry burdens, and disappear over the horizon. By the 18th century, Comanche life had become deeply connected to the horse. Children encountered horses almost from infancy. A young child might be placed on an animal before reaching an age when children in settled communities would be trusted with anything remotely dangerous. As the years passed, riding became less a special skill than an ordinary part of existence. Balance came naturally. Speed became familiar. The movements of the horse became a language understood through the legs, hands, and body. By the time a boy approached adulthood, he might have spent so many hours on horseback that riding looked effortless. Outsiders noticed, again and again, people encountering Comanche riders struggled to describe what they were seeing. A skilled warrior could lean low against the side of a galloping horse, using the animal's body as protection while still controlling its movement. He could rise again, turn, loose an arrow, change direction, and disappear into dust before a less experienced rider had properly understood what had happened. But none of that matters tonight. Your horse is standing still, and its most useful skill at this hour is simply being a horse. Consider what that means. You are a human being trying to sleep in dangerous country. Your eyesight in darkness is limited. Your hearing is respectable, but hardly extraordinary. Your sense of smell is almost embarrassing compared with many animals around you. Worst of all, once you fall deeply asleep, all of these senses become considerably less useful. Your horse has no such problem, it is a prey animal. Its ancestors survived because they noticed danger early. The horse does not need to identify an approaching shape as a member of a particular enemy band. It does not need to understand whether a distant predator is hungry. It only needs to know that something unfamiliar is there. An ear turns, the head rises, muscles tighten, breathing changes, a hoof moves, perhaps the animal gives a low snort. To an experienced owner sleeping nearby, these tiny changes can matter. Some historical accounts describe plains warriors sleeping with a rope connected to a favored horse close beside the lodge. Imagine the simplicity of that arrangement. No bell, no mechanical alarm, no fortified gate, only rope, horse, and sleeping human. You lie beneath your buffalo robe. The rope rests close to your hand or wrist. Outside stands an animal whose senses remain alert to the night. If the horse suddenly pulls, the movement reaches you. You wake. That is all. There is something almost amusing about how uncomplicated it is. The finest alarm available to you eats grass. It occasionally wanders where you do not want it to go. It requires enormous amounts of care, and it may choose an inconvenient moment to become interested in something entirely harmless. Still, when danger approaches, you would rather have those ears listening outside than rely entirely upon your own. Your relationship with the animal also carries a practical urgency, difficult to exaggerate. Lose your horse here, and you have lost much more than property. Look around. The plains stretch outward farther than you can comfortably walk. Water may be distant, game moves, weather changes quickly. In summer, heat and thirst can become dangerous. In winter, a northern storm can transform open country into a place where exposure kills. A mounted enemy can travel faster than you. A mounted hunting party can cover distances you cannot. Your ability to remain with your people may depend upon having a horse beneath you. So naturally, horse theft becomes one of the central dangers of life on the plains, and the Comanche themselves become extremely skilled at it. Raiding for horses can bring wealth and prestige. It can weaken enemies without requiring a large battle. Steal enough horses from an opposing group, and you have taken away transportation, hunting capacity, and military strength all at once. A horse herd is therefore both treasure and vulnerability. Tonight, beyond your own mount, many more animals may be grazing around the camp. Some belong to experienced warriors, some belong to families, some are pack animals, some may be young. Some may be prized animals acquired through trade or raids. A prosperous camp can possess a remarkable number of horses, and every one of them must eat. That means the herd cannot simply be locked inside a tiny enclosure. Horses need grass. They need water. They need room. The wealth of the camp therefore spreads outward into the darkness. Someone must watch it. Young men may spend portions of the night near the animals, listening and observing. But again, they do not need to inspect every shadow. The horses themselves help picture the herd beneath moonlight. Most animals are calm. Some graze, others rest. Their bodies form dark shapes against the pale grass. Then one horse stops eating, its head rises, another does the same. Several ears turn toward the west. The change is subtle, but to someone who has watched horses all his life, subtle is enough. He looks west. Perhaps he sees nothing. That does not mean nothing is there, so he waits. Now a horse farther out moves several steps, another follows. The herd becomes uneasy. This is information. Back in the teepee, you are still sleeping. Your own horse is listening too. Its head rises, the rope moves, your hand feels the change, and suddenly your eyes are open. For a moment you have no idea why, then the rope tightens again. Outside, the horse gives a quiet snort. Now you are listening. The dogs have not begun barking. The wolves remain distant. No one is shouting. You wait. This is where experience matters. Not every frightened horse means enemies. The animal might smell a wolf. It might hear another horse. It might react to something you cannot identify. A system that wakes everyone for every twitch would soon become useless, so you listen for the next layer, the herd. The dogs, the sentries, the landscape, nothing happens. Your horse relaxes, the tension in the rope disappears, you lie down again. And this small moment reveals something important about sleeping on the plains. Safety does not require remaining fully awake. It requires being able to wake quickly when the ordinary pattern changes. The difference matters. Human beings need sleep. Warriors need sleep. Hunters need sleep. Children, elders, mothers, horse herders, and everyone else moving with the camp need rest. Romantic stories sometimes imagine dangerous societies as places where everyone remains constantly alert, hand wrapped around a weapon, eyes fixed on the horizon. Real people cannot live that way. Eventually, exhaustion wins. The Comanche solution is not to defeat sleep. It is to surround sleep with layers of awareness. Your horse becomes one of those layers, and because you know the animal well, you learn its individual habits. Perhaps this horse is easily startled. Perhaps another rarely reacts unless something truly unusual approaches. Perhaps yours dislikes dogs. Perhaps it becomes restless before bad weather. These details are not trivial. Knowledge of an individual animal makes its behavior more useful. The longer you travel together, the more meaningful those tiny movements become. This relationship is built during daylight. You ride the horse, feed it, lead it to water, check its condition, manage its equipment. Depend upon it during hunts and journeys. Then darkness comes, and the relationship changes. Now the animal watches while you sleep. Not intentionally, not heroically. It is simply doing what horses have always done, listening for danger. The remarkable part is that you have learned to listen to the listener. Dawn has finally reached the camp. The first sunlight touches the tops of the grass. People emerge from tippies. Smoke begins rising again. Children move among the lodges, dogs become interested in breakfast. The horses are gathered and checked. The mysterious disturbance from the night has amounted to nothing. Perhaps it was a wolf passing farther out. Perhaps another animal crossed the wind. Perhaps the horse heard something that you never will. It hardly matters. The system worked without needing to prove itself. You place a hand against the horse's neck. The animal is warm despite the cold morning. Soon you may ride. Perhaps the camp will move. Perhaps hunters will follow buffalo. Perhaps scouts will travel beyond the horizon. But tonight, when darkness returns, this horse will again stand close, and you will again sleep within reach of it. Because on the open plains, the creature carrying you through the day may also be the creature that wakes you before danger arrives at night. Yet one horse can protect only so much. Beyond your tipi lies a much larger treasure, the herd. And protecting hundreds of animals scattered across dark grass requires another layer entirely. As the sun rises over the Comanche, you look beyond your own horse toward those distant moving shapes. By nightfall, they will become the outer heartbeat of the camp. And anyone hoping to reach you unseen will first have to pass through them. By evening, the herd has changed the shape of the land. In daylight, you can see individual animals scattered across the grass. Some stand close together. Others wander farther away, lowering their heads to graze, lifting them again whenever something catches their attention. But as the sun drops toward the western horizon, details begin to disappear. Colors fade first. Brown horses become gray shapes. Gray horses become shadows. Soon the herd seems less like a collection of animals and more like a living boundary around the camp. And that boundary matters. A wealthy Comanche family may own many horses, while a successful band can travel with a herd large enough to create serious problems for anyone responsible for watching it. Horses must eat. They must drink. They cannot simply remain tied beside the tipis all day and night. So the animals spread across useful grazing ground while people keep track of them. This creates a strange situation. The thing that gives the Comanche extraordinary mobility also becomes the thing most worth stealing. Everyone understands this. Your enemies understand it too. If a raiding party can take horses without fighting a battle, it may accomplish more than a direct attack ever could. A warrior without a horse is slower. A hunter without a horse has fewer options. A family without enough pack animals cannot move possessions as easily. And on a landscape measured not by city blocks but by rivers, springs, hunting grounds and days of travel, losing mobility can become dangerous very quickly. So when darkness settles over the prairie again, someone watches the herd. Perhaps tonight it is your turn. You leave the warmth of the teepee and walk beyond the sleeping camp. The temperature has dropped sharply. The earth still carries a little warmth from the afternoon, but the air above it has become cold. You pull your covering tighter. Behind you, the tipis are dark shapes beneath the sky. Only a few low fires remain. That is deliberate. A bright fire is comforting when you are cold. It is also visible from far away. On open country, light travels. A large flame can tell strangers exactly where you are long before you have any idea where they are. So darkness becomes a kind of shelter. You allow your eyes to adjust. Gradually, the world returns. Not clearly, but enough. You can distinguish the horizon. You can see the nearest horses. You can recognize movement, and above everything stretches the sky. There are nights on the plains when the stars seem almost unreasonable in number. Without towns glowing beyond the horizon, without lamps filling the air with haze, the darkness overhead becomes enormous. The Milky Way can appear like pale smoke drawn across the heavens, yet you are not here to admire it. You are listening to horses. Most of them are quiet. That is good. A calm herd produces its own soft nighttime rhythm. Grass tears between teeth. Hooves shift against earth. An animal exhales. Another moves past it. From farther away comes the occasional call of a night bird. And beyond that, perhaps a wolf. You know what normal sounds like. That knowledge is more important than seeing everything. A stranger trying to guard this herd might stare desperately into the darkness until his eyes hurt. You do not. You watch the animals. If something approaches from beyond your vision, there is a good chance they will notice before you do. The horse is built to survive by detecting what wants to approach it. Its eyes sit differently from yours. Its ears move towards sounds. Its sense of smell gives it information you cannot share. And most importantly, one frightened horse can influence another. Unease can move through a herd, one head rises, then several bodies turn. Animals bunch together or begin moving away from whatever has disturbed them. The herd becomes a vast field of living sensors. Of course, you would never call them that. To you, they are horses, that is enough. Tonight, several animals suddenly stop grazing. You notice because the rhythm changes. One moment there is quiet feeding, the next there is stillness. You look toward them, their heads are raised, ears point toward the north. You wait. The temptation to act immediately is strong, but patience is part of watching. Perhaps they smell wolves, perhaps another horse has moved through the grass, perhaps the wind has shifted. Then a horse snorts, another steps sideways, your attention sharpens. Farther behind you, a dog barks once. Now the pieces begin fitting together. Something may be moving out there. You still cannot see it. This is the uncomfortable part. The darkness does not explain itself. You must interpret. A second dog begins barking. The horses remain focused toward the north. Someone closer to camp has heard them too. A shadow moves between the tippies. Another person is awake. There is no need for panic. There may be nothing dangerous at all, but the camp is no longer entirely asleep. That alone is a form of protection. An enemy hoping to approach unnoticed depends upon surprise. Every alert horse removes a little of that surprise. Every barking dog removes more. Every waking person makes the approach harder. And this helps explain why stealing horses from a well-guarded camp requires patience, courage, and considerable skill. A thief must approach animals without causing them to react. He must understand wind direction. He must avoid dogs. He must avoid watchers. He must identify useful horses. Then he must somehow move those animals away without turning the entire night into thunder. The reward can be enormous. So people attempt it anyway. The Comanche themselves become famous for successful horse raids. The skill involved is not merely reckless bravery, it requires observation. A raiding party may watch an enemy camp before approaching. Where are the horses? Where are the guards? Which direction is the wind moving? Where can riders retreat? How quickly can the camp respond? The same knowledge used to protect a herd can be turned around and used to steal someone else's. That is one of the quieter truths of life here. Every defensive habit teaches you something about attack. You know why your own dogs are dangerous to intruders, so you understand why enemy dogs are dangerous to you. You know why horses react to unfamiliar scents, so you approach from favorable directions. You know that sleeping people become careless near dawn. You know that a campfire reveals silhouettes. You know how far sound can travel over open grass. Survival teaches tactics without requiring a classroom. Tonight, however, the mysterious movement to the north finally reveals itself. A small group of animals emerges faintly against the horizon. Not warriors, not raiders. The horses begin relaxing. The dogs lose interest. Whatever caused the disturbance moves away. The camp settles again. You remain with the herd. Minutes pass, then perhaps an hour. Time feels different when there's little to measure it. You watch stars move slowly across the sky. You shift your weight to stay warm. Occasionally you walk, the horses graze, and somewhere in the middle of this long, quiet watch, you begin to understand why outsiders so often underestimate the work behind Comanche mobility. They see the spectacular part. They see riders moving quickly across the plains. They hear stories of raids covering extraordinary distances. They describe warriors appearing unexpectedly and disappearing before pursuit can organize. But speed in daylight depends upon labor at night. Someone must guard the animals, someone must find grazing, someone must know water sources, someone must care for injured horses, someone must keep track of which animals belong to whom. Someone must remain awake while others sleep. A mobile society is not effortless, it is built upon constant work. The horse may provide freedom, but freedom has to be fed. It has to be watered. It has to be watched. And sometimes it has to be protected through the coldest hours before dawn. Eventually, another watcher comes to relieve you. You walk back toward the camp. The fires are almost completely dead now. Inside your teepee, warmth has gathered beneath the hides and robes. You lie down. Outside, your own horse remains nearby. Farther away, another person watches the herd. Beyond that, dogs move through the darkness. And farther still, wolves travel beneath the same stars, layer after layer. Not one perfect defense, many imperfect defenses overlapping. That is why you can close your eyes. You do not need to believe nothing dangerous exists outside. Quite the opposite. You know danger exists. Your enemies know these plains too. Predators move through the grass. Weather can change. Horses can wander. People can make mistakes. But sleep becomes possible because responsibility is shared across the camp and, in an accidental way, across the animals surrounding it. Your horse listens while you sleep. The watcher listens to the herd. The dogs listen for strangers. And everyone has learned to pay attention when the ordinary sounds of night suddenly change. The realization is simple. A Comanche warrior's greatest possession does not stop being useful when he climbs down from the saddle. The horse that carries him across the plains by day continues protecting his mobility after dark. Not because the horse understands warfare, not because it has been ordered to stand guard, but because its own fear makes it attentive. And the Comanche have learned how to make that attentiveness part of their own survival. Yet horses cannot solve the most basic problem of sleeping in dangerous country. Before you can guard a camp, you must decide where to place it. Choose badly, and the finest horse in the world may warn you only when the enemy is already too close. Choose well, and the landscape itself begins doing part of the work. So now we move from the breathing herd into deeper country, toward canyon walls, hidden water, open sightlines, and the quiet decisions made before the first tipi pole ever touches the ground. Because long before a Comanche warrior closes his eyes, someone has already decided exactly where the night should happen. Now we move from the breathing herd to the land beneath it, from the warm flank of a horse to the cold stone of the canyon country. Because before you can sleep safely, you must first choose where to sleep. And on the Comancheria, that decision can begin hours before sunset. You are riding beneath a pale winter sky. The year is somewhere in the middle decades of the 19th century, and the southern plains have become bitterly cold. There is a common mistake people make when imagining this country. They think of heat, Texas heat, dry grass beneath a blazing sun, dust hanging behind horses. And certainly, summer can be brutal. But winter on the high plains is another world entirely. The wind comes down hard and cold. There are few trees to stop it. There are no buildings to break its force. A person standing on open ground feels the weather strike with almost nothing between skin and sky. Snow can arrive, temperatures fall. A storm moving across the plains can turn familiar country into something dangerous with frightening speed. So tonight you're not looking for a beautiful campsite. You're looking for protection. The riders ahead already know where to find it. They have traveled this country before. Their parents knew it. Their grandparents knew it. Knowledge of water, grazing, shelter, and trails passes through generations because forgetting such things is expensive. Sometimes it is deadly ahead. The land appears to break open. You approach the edge carefully. Below lies a canyon. The flat prairie suddenly falls away into layers of stone, earth, brush, and shadow. The difference is immediate. Up above, the wind has been pulling at your clothing and pressing cold against your face. Down there, the walls promise shelter. This is why places such as Palo Duro Canyon become so important to Comanche bands, particularly during colder months. The canyon cuts deeply into the Texas Panhandle. From the open plains above, parts of this country can be surprisingly difficult to understand until you are almost upon them. Inside, the landscape changes. There are steep walls, there are protected bottoms. There is wood in places where the plains above offer little. There is water, there is grass for horses. And there are routes known to people who have spent years moving through this country. You begin descending. Horses pick their way carefully. Hooves strike stone. Loose earth slips beneath them. The air becomes stiller as the walls rise around you. Already the cold feels different. Not gone, just less cruel. The wind cannot strike with the same uninterrupted force. At the canyon floor, people begin examining possible places for camp. This is not a matter of stopping wherever someone feels tired. Several needs must be balanced. Water must be close enough to use. Horses need access to grazing. The ground must allow tippies to stand. There should be fuel for fires, and the position should not make the camp unnecessarily vulnerable. You begin to understand that a good campsite is a compromise between comfort and defense. Too close to certain trails, and strangers may approach easily. Too hidden, and you may lose useful sightlines. Too far from water, and ordinary work becomes exhausting. Too near a flood-prone creek bottom, and a sudden change in weather creates another kind of danger. The land asks questions, experience provides answers. Soon, the first tipi poles are brought forward. The tipi is one of the great practical technologies of plains life. To someone seeing it only in a painting, it can appear simple. A cone of poles, a hide covering, a small entrance. But simplicity is exactly the achievement. This is a home designed for people who move. It can be taken apart, it can travel, it can be raised again. The structure handles wind remarkably well when properly placed and constructed. A fire can warm the interior. An opening above allows smoke to escape. The hides provide protection from weather while remaining portable enough for a society whose movements are tied closely to horses, buffalo, seasons, and security. You help prepare the camp. Poles rise, hide covers are positioned. Possessions arrive from travois and pack animals. Children move around the growing cluster of lodges. Dogs investigate everything. Horses are led away toward suitable grazing. What had been an empty patch of canyon floor begins becoming a village. This transformation can happen with surprising efficiency. People know their work. There is no need to invent the process every evening. Repetition makes movement possible. That is another form of security. A camp that can be assembled efficiently can also be abandoned efficiently. Permanent walls protect you by resisting movement. The teepee protects you partly by allowing movement. If danger becomes too great in one place, the entire community is capable of going somewhere else. This is difficult for military forces accustomed to fixed targets. A fort remains where you left it. A town remains beside its road. A farm remains beside its fields. A mobile camp does not promise to be there tomorrow. An enemy may receive information that a Comanche band is camped beside a particular stream, travel toward it, and discover only cold ashes and hoofprints. Then comes the difficult part. Which hoofprints? A large camp creates trails in many directions. Hunters move, scouts move, horse herds move, families arrive and depart, tracks cross older tracks, weather changes them. Hard ground preserves little, rain can erase much. The land seems open, yet it can swallow information. For you, however, this canyon is not confusing. Certain bends are familiar. Certain springs are known. A narrow passage may have a name and a story. A ridge that looks meaningless to an outsider tells you where you are. This intimate geographic knowledge becomes another layer around sleeping people. Imagine two men in the darkness. One has spent his life here, the other arrived several weeks ago. Both possess good horses, both possess weapons, both are brave. But only one knows where the canyon trail divides beyond the ridge. Only one knows which creek still contains water after a dry season. Only one knows where a horse can climb safely to the rim. Only one knows which apparent escape route ends against steep stone. Their equipment may be similar. Their relationship with the landscape is not. That difference becomes enormous after dark. As evening approaches, you walk beyond the tippies. The canyon walls are turning red and brown beneath the final light. Shadows stretch across the bottom. The horses have been placed where they can feed while remaining under observation. The camp entrance and arrangement follow familiar practices, but there is no magical geometry that makes attack impossible. Instead, security comes from accumulated choices. The canyon itself reduces certain approaches. Watchers can focus attention on likely routes. The walls provide shelter from weather. Known trails provide ways out. Water and grazing keep the horses strong, and the people understand the country surrounding them. A good campsite does not eliminate danger. It changes the odds. That is enough. The temperature falls rapidly after sunset. You return toward the teepee. A fire burns inside. Smoke curls upward and escapes through the opening. The smell clings to hide and clothing, your eyes sting slightly. But compared with the wind above the canyon rim, the interior feels remarkably comfortable. You eat, conversation becomes quieter. Children settle outside. The horses continue grazing. Dogs move between lodges. Eventually, the camp begins preparing for sleep. And this is when the geography chosen earlier in the day reveals its full value. The wind can howl across the plains above. Down here, its force is broken. A rider crossing the open country cannot simply charge directly into the center of camp from every direction. He must find a way down. He must understand the trails. He must approach through terrain already familiar to the people below. That does not make surprise impossible. Nothing does. But it makes surprise harder. You lie beneath your robe. Stone walls rise beyond the hide walls of the tipi. Beyond those walls lies the open prairie. And somewhere on that prairie, wolves are beginning their nightly movement. You hear one faintly. The canyon changes the sound. A howl can travel strangely between walls, seeming closer or farther than it really is. You listen. Then you hear a horse. Then a dog. Ordinary sounds. Familiar sounds. The night settles, but summer will require a different kind of thinking. When warmer weather comes, the protection of a deep canyon may matter less than visibility. Out on the open plains, a camp can choose ground where movement can be noticed from far away to an outsider. This sounds exposed to you. Exposure can be useful. There is nowhere for a large approaching group to hide. A mounted column raises dust. Men and horses leave tracks. Campfires glow. Metal flashes in sunlight. Movement becomes visible across extraordinary distances. The emptiness that makes an unfamiliar soldier feel vulnerable gives you room to see him coming. This is one of the great contradictions of the plains. Cover can protect. Cover can also conceal your enemy. Open ground exposes you, but it exposes everyone else too. What matters is who understands the ground better. And for much of the Comanche era, that advantage belongs to the people who have spent their lives moving across it. An army can own maps. A Comanche scout knows where the map is wrong. A soldier can carry a compass. A hunter recognizes the shape of a distant ridge. An officer can estimate the distance to water. A family traveling this route may already know whether that water is likely to be there. Knowledge is lighter than equipment. It travels without a wagon. It makes no sound, and nobody can steal it while you sleep. Late in the night, the fire inside the teepee becomes embers. The canyon is quiet. You wake briefly and hear the familiar breathing of the horse outside. Nothing is wrong. So you return to sleep. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson hidden beneath all these defensive habits. The safest place is not always the place with the strongest walls. Sometimes it is the place you understand better than anyone who might come looking for you. Tomorrow the camp may remain here. Or perhaps the poles will come down. The hides will be folded. The horses will be loaded. By evening, only tracks and ashes may remain. But before that happens, another group of animals will spend the night wandering between the lodges. They are noisy, they are half independent. They have little respect for anyone hoping to enjoy uninterrupted sleep. And for an intruder crawling quietly toward a Comanche camp, they can be an absolute nuisance. The dogs are waiting, and unlike the horses, they have very little interest in being quiet about it. As evening settles over the camp, they wander between the tippies with the comfortable confidence of animals that know every familiar smell. One noses through a patch of discarded food. Another lies near a lodge entrance, head resting on its paws. A younger dog follows two children until they disappear inside. Farther out, another animal pauses near the edge of camp and looks toward the darkening grass. No one has ordered it to stand there. No one has assigned it a watch. It simply notices. That is enough. Dogs have lived alongside indigenous peoples of North America since long before horses transformed life on the Great Plains. They served many practical purposes, and before horses became widely available, dogs could help transport belongings by pulling smaller travois. Now, in a mounted Comanche camp, horses carry much of the burden that dogs once helped carry. But the dogs remain, and after sunset, their usefulness becomes especially obvious. Imagine you are an enemy approaching the camp. You have already done many things correctly. You waited until darkness. You avoided the most obvious trail. You left your horse far enough away that its movement would not immediately disturb the Comanche herd. You understand the wind. You move slowly. Your clothing does not catch against brush. Your feet find soft ground. You are patient. Ahead, you can just make out the shapes of the tipis. There are no enormous walls. No ditch surrounds the camp. No wooden gate blocks your way. For a moment, it looks almost easy. Then somewhere ahead of you, a dog lifts its head. You freeze. The dog has not seen you. Perhaps it has not heard you. But the wind has carried something unfamiliar. A scent. The animal stands. You remain perfectly still. This is where the darkness becomes uncomfortable. You cannot explain yourself to the dog. You cannot persuade it that the strange smell moving towards sleeping families is nothing worth mentioning. The animal takes several steps, then it barks. One sharp sound. You wait. Another bark comes from closer to the tipis. A second dog answers, then a third. Your carefully silent approach has become much less silent inside the camp. Someone wakes. A horse raises its head. Another dog runs toward the sound. You have discovered why an animal that spends much of the day sleeping beside children can become one of the most irritating obstacles facing a night intruder. Dogs do not need to defeat you. They only need to ruin the surprise. That is an important distinction. A camp dog does not have to be enormous. It does not have to attack a warrior. It does not have to understand what a raid is. It only has to recognize that something unfamiliar has entered its world. Noise does the rest. This makes the dogs another overlapping layer in the camp's security. The horses detect disturbances around the herd. Human watchers interpret their behavior. Dogs move through spaces between the animals and the sleeping lodges. People inside remain capable of waking quickly, and beyond them all lies terrain selected because it offers some advantage. Nothing works perfectly, everything helps. You return now to your own place inside the camp. The night is cold again. Your teepee contains the smell of smoke, hide, earth, and people. Outside, one of the dogs is still barking. You hear someone speak softly. A moment later, the barking stops. Perhaps the animal detected nothing more threatening than another dog. That happens. An alarm system made from living creatures is not free from false alarms. Dogs bark at things humans consider unimportant. Horses become nervous. Children wake. Someone coughs. Wind moves objects. The prairie contains thousands of ordinary sounds. And yet this apparent imperfection has an advantage. A potential intruder does not know which bark will be ignored. He does not know which horse is especially nervous. He does not know which person happens to be awake. He does not know whether a sentry is watching the same patch of darkness he hopes to cross. Uncertainty works in both directions. You cannot know exactly what lies outside, but anyone outside cannot know exactly what is happening within. Then there is the matter of fire. This seems like a small thing. It is not. A fire gives warmth. It cooks food. It provides light. It creates a place for conversation. During a cold night, the temptation to keep a bright fire burning can be considerable. But light is information. On open country, a careless flame can reveal a camp from far away. Smoke can do the same during daylight. The larger the fire, the easier it becomes for distant observers to locate you. So the comfort of fire must be balanced against the danger of being seen. You begin to notice how often life here involves such balances. Water is necessary, but other people also search for water. A canyon offers shelter, but it may restrict escape. Open ground gives visibility, but provides little protection from weather. A large horse herd gives wealth and mobility, but requires grazing and guarding. Dogs provide warning, but also make noise. Fire gives warmth, but reveals position. There is no perfect campsite. There is no perfect defense. There are only decisions. Good ones make the night easier. Bad ones accumulate. This is something military expeditions repeatedly discover when they enter Comanche country. An army may possess more firearms, more standardized equipment, and formal chains of command. But those advantages do not automatically answer the ordinary questions of the plains. Where is the enemy? Where is water? How far can the horses travel tomorrow? Which trail has recently been used? Where can hundreds of animals graze? How visible is tonight's camp? And perhaps most importantly, who is watching whom? A column of soldiers is difficult to hide. Men move together, wagons leave tracks, animals require forage, campfires can reveal positions. Dust rises during dry weather, metal equipment makes noise. A force that feels powerful when assembled can also become conspicuous. The Comanche do not need to attack such a force immediately. Often observation is more useful. A few riders can remain at a distance. They can watch movement. Count animals, study routines, notice where sentries stand, see when men become careless, then they can disappear. For the soldiers, this creates a peculiar anxiety. You can defend yourself against an enemy you can see. It is much harder to relax when you suspect someone may be watching from beyond the horizon. Night makes the feeling worse. A soldier hears a wolf and wonders whether something is approaching. He hears a horse move and reaches for his weapon. He stares into darkness that seems empty. Meanwhile, a person raised on these plains listens to many of the same sounds and sorts them into familiar categories. Normal, normal, normal. Different. That last category matters. It is the difference that wakes the camp. Tonight, you hear one, the dogs stop, not gradually. Several animals that had been moving around the camp become attentive toward the same direction. Then a horse snorts. You open your eyes, the fire is nearly gone. Someone outside moves. A quiet voice passes between two people. There is no shouting. You rise and step through the teepee entrance. Cold air touches your face. Above you, the stars remain bright. The camp appears still, yet people are awake. A watcher has noticed movement beyond the grazing horses. You look toward the darkness, nothing. Then, very faintly, you hear hoofbeats, not from the herd. Farther away. Several riders, perhaps, or fewer. Distance is difficult to judge. The dogs begin barking again. Now there is no reason to pretend the sound means nothing. People move quickly. Weapons are close. Horses are prepared. The sleeping camp becomes an alert camp in moments. And then the distant hoofbeats change direction. Whoever was out there does not approach. Perhaps they were enemies testing the camp. Perhaps scouts. Perhaps travelers who decided that coming closer was unwise. You may never know. That is another reality of frontier life. Not every danger becomes a battle. Many encounters end because someone notices someone else early enough. The successful defense may leave no dramatic story. No arrows, no gunfire, no heroic final stand. Only riders disappearing into darkness because surprise has been lost. The camp settles once more. You return inside. And strangely, after the excitement, sleep comes quickly. The dogs are quiet again, the horses settle, the normal pattern returns. You trust it because you have just watched it change and then restore itself. This is the part outsiders may find difficult to understand. You are not safe because the world outside has become harmless. You are safe because danger has difficulty arriving unnoticed. That is a very different kind of security. A stone fortress tries to keep danger physically outside. A mobile Comanche camp cannot depend on stone. Instead, it tries to detect danger while there is still time to act. Horses, dogs, watchers, darkness, distance, terrain, movement, knowledge. Each is weak alone. Together, they become something much stronger. And perhaps the most important piece is habit. Everyone understands that horses matter. Everyone understands that unfamiliar movement matters. People know the ordinary sounds of their camp. Children grow up within these routines. Knowledge does not have to be rediscovered each night. It becomes part of life. Long after midnight, you wake once more. A dog is asleep just outside. Its body is curled tightly against the cold. It looks remarkably unimpressive. This animal is not a mythical guardian. It is tired. Its fur is dirty. Earlier, it attempted to steal food. Tomorrow, it may spend half the afternoon sleeping in the sun. Yet if an unfamiliar person crawls through the grass tonight, those ears may rise before yours do. History is full of grand defenses, walls, forts, moats, watchtowers. Armies standing at gates. Here your defenses breathe. They graze, they bark, they become distracted. They need food. Sometimes they wander away, And somehow, when combined with people who understand them, they work remarkably well. You close your eyes. Outside, the last fire fades into ash. The camp becomes almost invisible beneath the plain's sky. There is no bright line marking where safety ends and danger begins, only layers fading outward into darkness. Your tipi, your horse, the dogs, the herd, the watchers, the open country, and somewhere beyond all of them, wolves by dawn. Nothing has happened. That may be the greatest success a night guard can achieve. No raid, no stolen horses, no frightened families. No story worth boasting about beside tomorrow's fire. Only sleep. Quiet, ordinary sleep in a place that outsiders consider terrifying. But farther east, another kind of camp is waking. Their soldiers rise beside saddles, rifles, wagons, and military equipment. They have sentries, they have orders, they have discipline. They believe they understand security. And yet many of them are about to discover that the plains reward a very different kind of knowledge. We drift onward now, away from the quiet tipis and toward the camps of the men trying to find them. Because the strangest way to understand how well the Comanche slept is to spend a night with the soldiers who could not. Let us leave the quiet Comanche camp behind and follow the faint glow on the eastern horizon, where another group of men is trying to sleep. These men have uniforms, they have rifles. They have military orders, officers, bugle calls, saddles, supply wagons and regulations explaining how a proper camp ought to function. They also have a problem. They are strangers. You are riding with a United States Army column somewhere on the southern plains during the 19th century. In the long decades when military expeditions repeatedly enter Comanche country and discover that finding an enemy can be considerably harder than fighting one, during daylight, the army looks impressive. Mounted soldiers move in organized groups, leather creaks beneath saddles. Metal equipment catches the sunlight. Wagons groan across uneven ground, hooves beat against dry earth. Dust follows the column like smoke. From inside that moving body of men and animals, there is a comforting sense of strength. There are many of you. You have weapons, you have supplies, you have commanders. Surely that must count for something, and it does. But the plains have a peculiar way of making large groups feel small. By late afternoon, the horizon still seems no closer than it did in the morning. There are no city walls ahead, no church tower, no village road, no obvious destination at all. Only grass, sky, and distance. The officer leading the column must eventually choose somewhere to stop. The horses need rest, the men need food, water must be found, sentries must be posted, animals must be secured, perhaps fires will be lit, perhaps coffee will be prepared. And almost immediately, the military camp begins announcing its existence to anyone who knows how to look. First comes the dust. A large mounted column can raise a trail visible from far away in dry country. Then come the tracks. Hundreds of hooves and boots do not cross soft ground invisibly. Wagons leave their own unmistakable marks. Then there are the fires. A soldier who has spent the day beneath sun and dust may welcome a warm meal when evening comes. He sees the fire as comfort. A distant observer may see it as a location marker. Smoke during daylight, glow after dark. The very things making the camp feel civilized can make it easier to find. You sit beside one of those fires now. A metal cup warms your hands. Your horse is tethered with the others. Someone nearby complains quietly about the day's march. Another man checks his equipment. The smell of animals hangs over everything. It is not an especially pleasant camp. But compared with sleeping alone on the open prairie, it feels secure. Then the sun disappears. The temperature falls, the world beyond the fire becomes black. This is when your confidence begins to weaken. You can see the man sitting opposite you. You can see the orange light against his face. You can see perhaps a little ground beyond him. After that, nothing. And because you are sitting in the light, anyone beyond the fire can see you better than you can see them. That thought is not particularly restful. You stare toward the darkness. Nothing moves, at least nothing you can identify. A sentry walks his route. The horses shift. Somewhere far away, a wolf howls. You stop listening to the conversation. There it is again. Another call answers. You know wolves live here. Perhaps you have heard stories about them approaching camps. Perhaps you have seen tracks. Perhaps someone has told you about enormous buffalo wolves following herds across the plains. You look toward the horses, they seem calm. But unlike the Comanche warrior you followed earlier, you do not know these animals in quite the same way. Your assigned mount may be familiar to you, perhaps even valued by you, but the military system is not built around the same lifelong riding culture, nor do you necessarily possess generations of family knowledge about this exact country. A howl is simply a howl. A ridge is simply a ridge. A dry creek is simply an inconvenience. You have maps. The Comanche have memory, and memory is difficult to defeat. Somewhere beyond your camp, perhaps several miles away, a small group of riders may be watching. You cannot know that uncertainty becomes one of the most exhausting features of campaigning here. The Comanche do not need to accept battle merely because you have come looking for them. They can withdraw, they can divide into smaller groups, they can travel through country unfamiliar to you. Scouts can observe your movements while remaining beyond easy reach. A military column might march for days without seeing the people it hopes to fight. Yet those people may know exactly where the soldiers are. Think about how irritating that must be. You wake, march, search, camp, post guards, sleep badly, wake again, and somewhere beyond the horizon, your enemy may simply be waiting for you to make a mistake. The mistake might be small. Perhaps the horses are placed poorly. Perhaps a sentry becomes inattentive. Perhaps the campfires remain bright too long. Perhaps scouts fail to notice riders watching from distant ground. One mistake alone may mean nothing. But, just as in the Comanche security system, layers matter only here. The layers can fail in the opposite direction. The fire reveals your position. The herd is not watched carefully enough. The sentry cannot interpret what the horses are telling him. The landscape is unfamiliar. The enemy understands your routine. Suddenly, your military camp has become a collection of predictable habits. You lie down. Your blanket smells faintly of dust and horse. The ground beneath you is hard. The fire has been reduced, though perhaps not as much as it should have been. A sentry passes nearby. For a while you sleep. Then something wakes you, hooves, you sit upright. Several horses are moving, someone curses, a sentry calls out. For a few confused moments, no one seems to know what is happening. Men emerge from blankets, someone reaches for a weapon. The horses settle. False alarm, perhaps. You lie down again. Now sleep is harder. This is the advantage of fear and the disadvantage of fear at the same time. Fear keeps you alert. Too much fear exhausts you. If every wolf becomes an enemy scout, every moving horse a raid, and every shadow a warrior, then the night itself begins defeating you. The Comanche warrior does not possess supernatural calm. He simply has more categories. He knows more of the ordinary that allows him to recognize the extraordinary. You have fewer categories, so everything unfamiliar demands attention. The wolf calls again. You listen. What does it mean? You have no idea. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps buffalo are nearby. Perhaps the pack has noticed your camp. Perhaps something else has disturbed them. You cannot read the sound with confidence, so the information is wasted. The same landscape is speaking to both sides. Only one side is fluent. This difference appears during daylight as well. Your officers may study maps showing rivers and major landmarks, but a map cannot always tell you whether a particular spring has gone dry. It cannot tell you where buffalo moved yesterday. It cannot show every hidden trail into a canyon. It cannot tell you which patch of ground becomes nearly impossible for wagons after rain. Local knowledge lives at a finer scale. The Comanche have accumulated that knowledge through movement. Their lives require it. A child learns by traveling. A hunter learns by watching. A warrior learns through raids, journeys, and experience. The landscape is not merely crossed, it is remembered. For the army, every mile farther into unfamiliar country stretches the supply line. Men need food, horses and mules need forage, equipment breaks, animals become exhausted, water controls movement. A mounted Comanche group can travel with different expectations and different logistical needs. It does not mean Comanche riders can move forever without food or rest. They cannot. It means their system is adapted to the country in ways a conventional military column struggles to reproduce, and adaptation matters most when darkness comes. Tonight, you are protected by numbers. The Comanche are protected partly by invisibility. You need to know where they are. They often need only to know where you are. That is an unpleasant imbalance. Weeks of campaigning can pass this way. Rumors, tracks, distant riders, abandoned camps, cold ashes. Signs that people were here recently but are no longer here. You arrive after they leave. You follow one trail until it disappears. You hear reports from scouts, you change direction, and each night the same ritual begins again. Secure the animals, post the sentries, prepare food, watch the darkness, try to sleep. Some soldiers undoubtedly become very good at this. Experienced frontier troops learn. Scouts from indigenous nations provide crucial knowledge that army officers do not possess themselves. Commanders adapt. They study Comanche habits. They become more careful. This is not a story in which one side understands everything and the other understands nothing. People learn from failure. And few officers have more reason to learn than Ranald Mackenzie. In the early 1870s, Mackenzie enters the struggle against the Comanche with the determination of a professional soldier facing an enemy who repeatedly refuses to behave according to convenient military expectations. He is aggressive, persistent, and increasingly experienced. But experience often begins with embarrassment. You can imagine the mood of a cavalry camp after a long march. The horses are tired, the men are tired, routine takes over, animals are placed for the night, guards are assigned. People begin sleeping. Somewhere outside the camp, Comanche observers are studying those routines. They do not need to defeat the soldiers in a grand battle. They only need something the soldiers cannot easily replace: the horses. Without horses, cavalry becomes a rather unfortunate contradiction, and on the high plains, losing mounts can turn a strong military unit into a slow and vulnerable collection of men. The Comanche understand this perfectly. Horse theft is not a childish prank. It is strategy. Take the animal and you take speed. Take enough animals and you take pursuit. You also deliver a message. We reached your camp. We watched you. We took what mattered. And you could not stop us. The night grows deeper. You pull your blanket tighter. Somewhere among the army horses, an animal lifts its head. Far beyond the edge of camp, perhaps another rider is already counting the sentries. The wolves continue calling. The soldiers hear wilderness, the Comanche hear familiar country. And before long, one of the army's most determined commanders will wake to discover that the darkness has taken something very personal from him: his horse. We are moving toward Blanco Canyon now, toward Quanah Parker, Mackenzie's cavalry, and a nighttime humiliation written not in blood, but in hoofprints. Because sometimes the most devastating attack is the one that leaves the enemy alive to discover what is missing. Night settles over Blanco Canyon. The fires of the cavalry camp have burned lower now, and the hard edges of saddles, wagons, rifles, and men have softened into shadow. Somewhere nearby, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie is sleeping. His soldiers have spent another difficult day moving through country that refuses to cooperate with military expectations. They have horses, they have weapons, they have scouts, they have discipline. But somewhere beyond the reach of their campfires, Quanah Parker and a small group of Comanche warriors understand something far more useful. They know exactly where the soldiers are. The year is 1871. Mackenzie has brought elements of the 4th United States Cavalry into the Texas Panhandle as part of the growing military pressure against Comanche bands still living beyond reservation control. Among the Comanche resisting that pressure is Quanah Parker, a young leader of the Quahadi. He knows this country. More importantly, he understands how an army behaves when it believes darkness has hidden it. The soldiers are not entirely alone in their knowledge. Mackenzie has Tonkawa scouts with him, men whose experience of the plains gives the army abilities conventional cavalry cannot easily reproduce. This matters. The conflict unfolding here is not a simple story of Comanche people against outsiders who know nothing. Indigenous nations have their own rivalries, alliances, histories, losses, and reasons for fighting. The Tonkawa have suffered terribly in conflicts with the Comanche. Now, some serve as scouts for the army. The plains contain old grievances alongside new wars. Still, during these early movements through the canyon country, Quanah has an advantage: observation. For several days, Comanche warriors watched the soldiers. Think about how uncomfortable that fact would feel if you knew it. You eat, they watch. You saddle your horse, they watch. You post guards, they watch. You prepare for sleep, they watch. You may never see them. That is the important part. A scout does not need to reveal himself to learn. He notices where the horses are kept. He watches which groups of soldiers remain close to their animals. He notices where attention weakens. He learns the shape of the camp. Then he carries that information away. The army is searching for the Comanche. Yet for a time, the Comanche know more about the army than the army knows about them. Tonight, that imbalance is about to become embarrassing. You are asleep near the cavalry camp. The ground is cold, the horses stand in the darkness. A few men remain awake. Perhaps you trust them. Perhaps you trust the number of soldiers around you. Perhaps after enough exhausting nights, you simply stop imagining that this will be the night something happens. That is how routine works. The first night in dangerous country, every noise wakes you. After many nights, fatigue begins negotiating with caution. Surely that sound is nothing. Surely the horses are fine. Surely the sentries are watching. Surely tomorrow will be another long, uneventful march. Beyond the camp, figures move quietly. Quana and his companions are not trying to conquer the entire cavalry force. That would be unnecessary. They are interested in the animals. A horse herd can be worth more than a dramatic exchange of gunfire. If the Comanche can reach the mounts, create confusion, and drive valuable animals away, they can damage the expedition while risking relatively few warriors. So they approach. Every lesson from the earlier nights now appears in reverse. Wind matters, dogs matter, horses matter, guards matter, firelight matters. The location of sleeping men matters. The Comanche understand these things because they solve the same problems in their own camps. To become skilled at preventing horse theft is also to become skilled at understanding how horse theft succeeds. The darkness hides movement, the soldiers sleep. Then the calm around the animals breaks. Horses move, men wake, voices rise. For a few moments, the carefully ordered cavalry camp becomes confusion, and when the confusion finally settles, the accounting begins. Animals are missing. A substantial number of valuable horses and mules have been driven away. Among the lost animals is one with particular emotional value, Mackenzie's own grey horse. There is something almost painfully personal about that detail. An officer can describe lost military property in a report. He can calculate supplies. He can request replacements. But a favored horse is different. The animal has carried him. He knows its movement, its habits, its pace. Now someone else has it. The theft carries a message more insulting than a distant attack. Quana's warriors did not merely observe the cavalry. They entered its sphere of security, reached its most important animals, and left. The army remains standing. Its weapons remain. Its officers remain. Yet its vulnerability has been demonstrated. Imagine waking the next morning. The light reveals churned ground. Hoofprints run away from camp. Men search. Orders are given. Tempers rise. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the stolen animals are already being moved farther away. Pursuit sounds simple until you remember the country. Which direction did the thieves truly take? Where are they going? Do they have fresh horses waiting? Do they know a canyon route you do not? How much water do your remaining animals have? How far can you follow before pursuit itself becomes dangerous? The landscape returns to the story. It always does. On a European battlefield, losing a horse may force a man to walk. On the Llano Estacado, losing enough horses can threaten the entire purpose of an expedition. Distances are too great. Water is too uncertain. The enemy is too mobile. Cavalry without reliable mounts cannot pursue mounted Comanche warriors on equal terms. And the Comanche have understood the strategic value of horse theft for generations. Long before Mackenzie arrives, horses have been taken in raids against Spanish settlements, Mexican communities, neighboring indigenous peoples, and later American settlements. A successful raid can increase wealth while reducing the enemy's ability to move. It is economics and warfare tangled together, and it explains why nighttime security around horses receives so much attention. You think again of the Comanche camp, the favored horse near the teepee. the broader herd under observation. The dogs moving around the perimeter, people listening for changes. Now you understand why those habits exist. The Comanche do not protect horses carefully because they are unusually nervous. They protect them because they know exactly what a skilled thief can do. They know because they are skilled thieves themselves, Mackenzie learns. That is important too. It would be easy to leave him here as the foolish officer whose horse disappeared in the night. History is rarely so convenient. He studies the enemy. He becomes more persistent. He relies on experienced scouts. He begins understanding that defeating the Comanche cannot simply mean waiting for them to appear in a conventional battle. The struggle becomes increasingly focused on the foundations that allow independent life on the plains to continue. Horses, buffalo, food, shelter, winter camps, mobility. That shift will eventually become devastating. But for now, in 1871, the lesson belongs to Quana. The army has entered his world, and his world operates by different rules. Knight does not automatically belong to the larger force. A uniform does not make a man less visible. A rifle does not help if the enemy never presents a target. A camp full of soldiers is not secure simply because there are many soldiers in it. And a horse is never just a horse. It is movement. That truth becomes clearer as Mackenzie's campaigns continue. The army grows better at locating Comanche camps. Scouting improves, pressure increases. The military begins staying in the field through seasons when earlier campaigns might have withdrawn. There is less space for the old pattern of disappearing and returning. Meanwhile, the buffalo world itself is collapsing. Commercial hunters kill enormous numbers of animals. The herds upon which plains life depends begin vanishing. This transformation reaches far beyond food. Buffalo hides provide tipi covers and clothing. Bones and other parts become tools. Hunting shapes movement. Trade depends upon the animals. A world built around buffalo cannot remain unchanged when buffalo disappear, and horses cannot solve that problem. You can ride farther, you can raid. You can move camp. You can evade soldiers. But mobility is useful only while there remains somewhere to go. The circle begins tightening. Yet there are still nights when the old system works. Nights when a Comanche camp sleeps beyond the reach of the army. Nights when wolves call across the plains. Nights when horses stand beside tipis and dogs wander between them. Nights when soldiers search miles away and find nothing. Quana continues resisting. The Quahadi remain among the Comanche groups most difficult for the United States military to force onto the reservation. Their knowledge of the staked plains and canyon country helps them remain beyond easy control. But Mackenzie has learned something from humiliation. If he cannot reliably defeat mounted Comanche warriors by chasing them across open country, then he must attack the system that allows them to keep moving. A few years after the stolen horses at Blanco Canyon, that logic will lead him back into the canyon country. This time, the outcome will be very different. The sun sinks over the plains once more. You're back in the Comanche camp now. A horse stands beside the teepee. Its breathing is steady. Dogs move through the shadows. The herd is secure. The wolves begin calling. Everything still works, for tonight. And perhaps that is what makes the approaching change so melancholy. A survival system refined across generations can appear almost permanent when you live inside it. The trails are known. The horses reproduce. Children learn to ride. Buffalo return with the seasons. Canyons provide shelter. The wolves howl as they always have. It is easy to imagine that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. History rarely gives warnings in a form people can easily recognize. Sometimes the world does not end with one great battle. Sometimes pieces are removed one at a time. First, the buffalo become harder to find. Then soldiers remain longer. Then scouts discover hidden routes. Then horses are captured. Then winter arrives. And eventually, a system that once seemed stronger than any invading army finds itself without the animals and space it needs to survive. So we drift onward now, away from Mackenzie's missing grey horse, and toward a September morning 3 years later. The place is Palo Duro Canyon. The year is 1874. The wolves are still there. The horses are still there. The canyon walls still rise above the sleeping camps. But this time, before the sun has properly warmed the stone, The familiar layers of protection are going to fail. And when they do, the most important casualties will not be the warriors, they will be the horses. Let us cross the darkening plains once more, leaving Blanco Canyon behind and following the old trails north toward a place where stone walls rise from the earth like the edges of a buried world, Palo Duro Canyon. The year is 1874. September is ending, and somewhere below the canyon rim, people are sleeping. If you could stand high above them in the final hours before dawn, you might believe that the old system remains intact. The tippies are there, the horses are there, dogs move among the sleeping lodges. Watchers listen to the darkness. Families have chosen the canyon because generations of experience have taught them what such places can provide. Shelter, water, grass, wood. Hidden trails, protection from the wind, and perhaps most importantly, distance from the settlements and military posts spreading across the plains. The canyon feels like refuge. It has been refuge before. That is precisely why the morning ahead will matter so much. You are sleeping beneath a buffalo robe. The earth beneath you is cool. Outside, the air carries the smell of horses and old fires. Perhaps you wake briefly. A dog moves nearby. A horse stamps. Then everything settles again. Nothing about those sounds is unusual. You close your eyes. Far beyond the camp, however, other men are awake. Colonel Ranald Mackenzie has returned. 3 years have passed since the embarrassing raid in which Comanche warriors stole horses and mules from his command. 3 years is enough time for a determined officer to learn. Mackenzie is no longer simply searching the plains and hoping to force mounted warriors into the kind of battle his cavalry understands. The strategy has changed. The army is now striking at the foundations of independent plains life. The campaign is part of what becomes known as the Red River War. United States forces move against Comanche, Kiowa, Southern Cheyenne, and Arapaho groups resisting confinement to reservations. The objective is not merely to win a dramatic fight. It is to make continued resistance impossible. That difference is about to become painfully clear. On the morning of September 28th, Mackenzie's 4th Cavalry approaches Palo Duro Canyon. Scouts have helped locate the camps. That detail matters enormously. For decades, one of the Comanche's greatest advantages has been the simple difficulty of finding them. You cannot attack a camp whose location you do not know. You cannot capture horses you cannot reach. You cannot destroy supplies hidden somewhere in hundreds of miles of plains and canyon country. But once scouts discover the location, the problem changes. Now the canyon that offers shelter can become a trap. The walls that break the winter wind also limit certain directions of movement. The trails that local people understand can be followed by enemies, if those enemies have guides who know enough. No defensive system survives forever once an opponent learns how it works. Before dawn, soldiers begin moving. You are still below. Perhaps the first warning comes from the animals, perhaps from a person, perhaps from the distant sound of movement where no movement should be. The exact sensations of those sleeping in the camps cannot be recovered. History preserves reports. It does not preserve every heartbeat. But we can imagine the pattern you now know so well beginning to change. A horse raises its head, dogs react, people wake. The ordinary sounds of morning are replaced by something unfamiliar. This time the disturbance does not disappear. Soldiers are coming into the canyon. The camp wakes rapidly. The protection of darkness is ending at exactly the wrong moment. People move. Warriors prepare to resist. Families begin escaping. Children must be gathered. Possessions that seemed important yesterday suddenly become less important than speed. This is the terrible advantage of surprise. It compresses decisions. There is no comfortable hour to discuss what should be carried, no careful packing, no leisurely dismantling of the tipi. You take what you can, you move, the cavalry attacks. Gunfire echoes between the canyon walls. Horses panic, dust rises, voices carry strangely through the stone corridors. The peaceful geography of the previous night becomes a battlefield. Yet the attack does not become a simple massacre of the people in the camps. Many escape. Warriors resist while families climb away from immediate danger. The human casualties are relatively limited compared with what might be imagined from the importance later attached to the battle, but Mackenzie has learned something. He does not need to kill every warrior. He does not even need to capture every family. He needs the horses. Look down at the canyon floor. The animals that have occupied every part of our nighttime journey are suddenly everywhere. For generations, horses have made Comanche mobility possible on an extraordinary scale. They carry hunters, they carry warriors, they transport possessions, they allow camps to move, they create wealth, they provide the speed that makes pursuit so frustrating. At night, they warn sleeping people of disturbances. A horse standing beside a tipi can become the first alarm. A herd spread around camp can reveal approaching movement. The entire world we have been describing depends upon these animals. And Mackenzie captures an enormous number of them, more than 1,000. Accounts vary regarding the exact total captured and the number ultimately destroyed, which is worth remembering whenever history offers suspiciously perfect figures. What matters is the scale. The cavalry now controls a vast portion of the horse herd for the Comanche and their allies watching from the surrounding heights. The meaning is obvious. The animals below are not simply property, they are the machinery of freedom. Mackenzie faces a practical problem. He cannot conveniently take every captured animal with him, nor can he allow the horses to be recovered after his force leaves. So an order is given. Most of them are to be killed. The decision is brutal. There is no need to soften it. The horses are driven together. Then soldiers begin shooting them, again and again. The sound carries through the canyon. If you have spent this entire journey learning what a horse means to a Comanche family, then you understand why this moment matters more than a simple battlefield victory. A warrior can escape, but his horse may not. A family can climb out of the canyon, but much of what allows that family to continue living independently on the plains remains below. The destruction continues. Hundreds of animals fall, then more. By the time it is over, the canyon floor contains a terrible mass of dead horses. The smell will remain after the soldiers leave. So will the silence. Think back to your first night. You were lying inside the teepee. Your horse stood close enough to hear breathing. A small movement from the animal could wake you beyond it. The herd created another layer of awareness. Those horses were security. Now imagine returning after the battle. The teepee may be gone. Possessions have been destroyed or captured. Food stores are lost, winter is approaching, and the herd that once represented movement has been reduced catastrophically. You cannot repair this loss by courage. You cannot replace hundreds of horses with determination. You cannot simply decide to ride faster. The system has been attacked at its foundation. That is what Mackenzie has finally understood. Earlier campaigns attempted to catch mounted Comanche groups across immense distances. But a mounted people who know the land can often choose whether to be caught. Destroy mobility, however, and the equation changes. The Battle of Palo Duro Canyon therefore becomes important, not because it is the largest battle or the bloodiest. It is important because of what happens after the fighting. The destruction of horses and supplies places enormous pressure on people facing the coming winter. The buffalo herds are also disappearing. Commercial hunting has devastated them across vast regions. Every year, the old economic world becomes harder to maintain. Imagine the combination. Fewer buffalo, fewer horses, more military patrols, less secure winter refuge, more pressure to enter reservations. Each problem reinforces the others. Just as the old security system consisted of overlapping strengths, its collapse consists of overlapping losses. Remove only the wolves and people can still survive. Remove only some horses and more can perhaps be acquired. Lose one camp and another can be established. But remove buffalo, destroy large horse herds, occupy familiar country, and maintain military pressure at the same time, and mobility begins to fail. There are fewer places left where the old pattern can continue. That is the deeper sadness of this September morning. The Comanche warriors have not suddenly forgotten how to ride. They have not forgotten the landscape. They have not forgotten how to read horses, dogs, tracks, weather, or darkness. Their knowledge remains. The environment in which that knowledge can sustain independence is being deliberately dismantled. You climb from the canyon with the survivors below. Smoke rises. The sun is higher now. The stone walls that protected the camp from winter wind seem different. They are still beautiful, still familiar, still useful, but no longer unquestioned sanctuary. Once an enemy learns the road into your safest place, safety itself changes. Night will come again. It always does. Perhaps you will sleep somewhere else. Perhaps you still have a horse. Perhaps another family shares one. Perhaps wolves will howl beyond the new camp. And for a moment, with your eyes closed, the sound may make the world seem unchanged, but it is changing. The buffalo are vanishing. The army is learning. The horse herds are shrinking. And the open country itself is being divided by forces that will eventually make the old freedom of movement impossible. Within less than a year, the last major groups still resisting will face choices their grandparents could scarcely have imagined. Quanah Parker will confront one of them. He has escaped military destruction before. He has watched soldiers fail to find him. He has ridden through country they barely understood. He has belonged to a world in which mobility could answer almost every threat. Now mobility itself is being taken away. The sun begins lowering over Palo Duro. The surviving people move farther from the canyon. Behind them lies a battlefield. But perhaps battlefield is not quite the right word. The decisive event has not been a glorious charge. It has not been a duel between famous warriors. It has not been one final heroic stand. It has been the destruction of animals. That is a much quieter form of conquest, and in some ways, a more effective one. For generations, the horse allowed the Comanche to turn distance into protection. Now distance begins working against them. Without enough horses, the next water source is farther away. The next buffalo herd is harder to reach. The next camp is harder to move. The next winter is harder to escape. The animal that once woke a warrior when danger approached can no longer warn him. It lies silent on the canyon floor. And somewhere beyond the rim, as darkness spreads over the plains, a wolf begins to howl. The sound is familiar, perhaps painfully so, because the wolf is still following the old rules. The seasons still turn, the wind still crosses the grass, stars still appear above the canyon, but human history has shifted beneath them. We drift onward now into the final nights of the free Comancheria, when Quanah Parker and his people must decide whether knowledge, courage, horses, and distance can still keep the old world alive. And there, at the end of our journey, we will discover why the wolves were never truly the most dangerous creatures surrounding a sleeping Comanche warrior. We drift onward, deeper into the final nights of the old Comancheria. Palo Duro Canyon is behind you now. The dead horses remain beneath its walls, but the people who escaped cannot remain still for long. Winter does not care that a battle has been lost. Hunger does not wait for grief. Children still need food. Families still need shelter. The surviving horses still need grass and water. And somewhere across the plains, the buffalo herds that once seemed almost endless are becoming harder to find. For generations, movement has been one of the great answers to danger. When enemies approached, you moved. When grazing failed, you moved. When buffalo shifted, you followed. When winter winds became too cruel on the open plains, you sought the protection of canyon country. Movement was not simply travel, it was survival. Now every mile has become more difficult. There are fewer horses, there are fewer buffalo. Military columns remain active. Scouts know more of the old hiding places. The distances that once protected you begin to feel different. A wide prairie is useful when you have a strong horse beneath you. On foot, that same prairie can become frighteningly large. Still, night comes, you make camp. Perhaps there are fewer tippies than before. Perhaps possessions have been lost. Perhaps families share what remains. The fires are kept small, the dogs settle. The surviving horses are watched carefully. And then from somewhere beyond the camp comes the old sound. A wolf howls. You listen, another answers. For a moment, the years seem to fall away. You could be a child again, lying beneath warm hides while adults speak quietly beside the fire. You could be listening to horses breathing outside. You could be hearing your elders describe distant waterholes, buffalo movements, winter trails, and raids remembered from years before your birth. The wolves sound the same, that is almost cruel. Human worlds can collapse while the night continues as if nothing has happened. The stars remain, the wind remains, the canyon walls remain, The wolves do not understand treaties. They do not know reservation boundaries. They do not know that soldiers in distant forts are waiting. They know hunger, territory, pack, buffalo, weather, and darkness. For the Comanche warrior listening from his bed, those sounds still contain something familiar, but the larger pattern has changed. That is the important thing. Remember what you learned on your first night. One sound by itself means little. You understand the world by noticing relationships. The horse, the herd, the dogs, the wolves, the landscape, the people. Each part tells you something about the others. Now those relationships are breaking. The horse herd has been devastated. The buffalo are disappearing. The army can remain in the field longer. Traditional refuges are no longer reliably hidden. Even the wolves will eventually suffer from the destruction of the buffalo world. One piece changes, then another, then another. A system can survive the loss of one layer. It becomes much harder when nearly every layer is under pressure at once. By the spring of 1875, Quanah Parker and the remaining Quahadi face a reality that courage alone cannot change. The old independent life on the plains has become nearly impossible to sustain. Quanah has not suddenly become less skilled. He has not forgotten how to ride. He has not forgotten how to fight. He has not forgotten the country. This matters because surrender is often described too simply. We imagine one side proving itself braver or stronger in battle. Then the defeated side gives up, but the ending here is more complicated. The military pressure works partly because the material foundations of resistance have been destroyed. Without sufficient horses, movement becomes harder. Without buffalo, food and material life become harder. Without secure places to recover, every loss becomes more difficult to replace. The war is no longer only against warriors. It is against the possibility of continuing to live as they had lived. In June of 1875, Quanah Parker and his Quahadi followers enter Fort Sill. The long period of independent Comanche resistance on the southern plains is effectively ending. Imagine approaching the fort. You have spent your life in country without permanent walls defining where you are allowed to go. Now buildings stand ahead. Military order has become physical. Roads lead toward structures that do not move with the seasons. There are fences, storehouses, offices, rules, lists, schedules. The world is becoming fixed. For someone raised in a culture of extraordinary mobility, that change may be almost as profound as military defeat itself. You dismount, the horse beneath you is still a horse. It still breathes warmly into cold air. It still turns its ears toward unfamiliar sounds. It still notices movement before you do. But its meaning is changing once. A good horse offered access to an enormous world. You could ride toward buffalo. You could travel between camps. You could join a raid. You could disappear into country an enemy struggled to cross. Now the land itself is being reorganized. A horse cannot outrun policy forever. It cannot outrun the destruction of buffalo. It cannot cross every new boundary without consequence. The animal remains powerful. The world around it has changed, and so has the night. Years pass, settlers spread farther across the plains. Railroads cut through country once crossed by buffalo trails. Towns appear. Fences divide grasslands. Cattle replace buffalo in many places. The old darkness is gradually filled with different sounds. Wagon wheels, axes, hammering, locomotives, cattle gunfire, and fewer wolves. This brings us back to the animal with which our journey began, the wolf. For the people expanding into the plains, wolves are often understood very differently. A rancher sees a possible threat to livestock. A hunter sees competition. Government programs and private campaigns encourage killing. Poison is used, traps are set, animals are shot. As buffalo populations collapse, the ecological world supporting large numbers of plains, wolves collapses with them. The wolves retreat. Then they vanish from much of the country where their howls had once been ordinary. And that leaves us with a strange reversal. The newcomer fears the wolf and attempts to remove it. The Comanche warrior had lived beside wolves for generations without needing to destroy them in order to sleep. That does not mean wolves were harmless. They were wild predators. It does not mean Comanche people lived in some perfect harmony where humans and animals never came into conflict. Life on the plains was far too practical for that kind of sentimental picture. The important point is subtler. Familiarity changes fear. When you understand an animal's habits, you know when its behavior is ordinary. When you know what ordinary sounds like, you're better prepared to notice when something is wrong. The wolves were part of that familiar world. Their howls belonged to the night. Their movements followed the same buffalo landscape upon which human lives depended. Their presence could be observed, their changes could be noticed. And so the question we began with now seems slightly misleading. How did Comanche warriors sleep surrounded by wolves? They slept because being surrounded by wolves was not necessarily the unusual part. The dangerous thing was change. A horse becoming tense, dogs barking toward the same patch of darkness, a herd shifting unexpectedly, a familiar trail showing fresh tracks, a distant campfire where no campfire should be. Or perhaps wolves that had been calling normally becoming suddenly quiet. That silence does not automatically prove that enemies are approaching. Nature does not provide such convenient certainty. But to an experienced listener, a change in the behavior of animals can justify attention. And attention is what the entire system has been built around. Not magical protection, not fearlessness, attention. You remember the first night again. The teepee around you, the buffalo robe, the horse outside, the herd farther away, dogs wandering between the lodges, watchers listening, wolves calling beyond them. Every layer extends a little farther into the darkness. At the center lies a sleeping person. He can sleep because he is not truly alone. His community is around him. Animals are around him. Knowledge is around him. Memory is around him. The landscape itself is familiar. This is what the soldiers struggled to reproduce. They could build forts, they could post sentries, they could carry rifles and supplies, but they could not immediately acquire generations of knowledge simply by marching into the country. That knowledge had to be learned, borrowed from scouts, or replaced by other advantages. Eventually, the United States did overwhelm Comanche independence, but notice how it happened. Not because one night a soldier discovered a better way to listen to wolves, not because cavalrymen suddenly became better riders than people raised on horseback, not because the Comanche forgot how to choose camps. The larger system was attacked. Buffalo were disappearing. Horse herds were destroyed or captured. Military pressure became more persistent. Independent movement became increasingly difficult. The Comanche security system did not simply fail because its ideas stopped working. The world required for those ideas to work was being taken apart. That distinction matters. Tonight, Palo Duro Canyon is quiet again. If you stand there now in your imagination, the stone still catches the last red light of evening. Wind moves along the rim, the shadows deepen. The old trails remain in places, though many feet have crossed them since. You might hear tourists during the day, you might see modern roads. The landscape has accumulated another century and more of stories, but wait until darkness. Let the voices fade. Let the final light disappear from the canyon walls. Imagine the grasslands beyond them, without highways, electric lamps, fences, or distant towns. Imagine the sky becoming completely black. Then imagine a howl, one voice carrying across the open country, another answering farther away. You're back beneath the buffalo hide. Your horse stands outside. The rope lies close to your hand. A dog moves past the entrance. The herd is calm. Nothing has disturbed the camp. You listen for a moment. The wolf calls again. And now, after this long journey, you do not hear quite the same thing you heard at the beginning. At first, you heard danger, teeth in the darkness, a predator beyond the fire. Now you hear context. The wolf is where a wolf should be. The horses are behaving as horses should behave. The dogs are quiet. The people around you are sleeping. The ordinary pattern remains intact, so your breathing slows, your hand relaxes. You close your eyes. This may be the final irony of the story. The people who later conquered the plains often felt safer after the wolves were removed. But for the Comanche warrior sleeping there generations earlier, the howl itself could belong to the familiar order of the night. He did not need silence to feel safe. He needed the right sounds, the breathing horse, the quiet herd, the occasional dog, wind through dry grass. And somewhere far beyond the tipi, wolves calling beneath an enormous sky. The wolves were never walls, they were never guards standing under command, they were never tame companions protecting the camp. They were simply part of a world the Comanche had learned to observe with extraordinary care. And perhaps that is the final thing worth remembering as the fire dies beside us. People often survive difficult places, not by forcing those places to become harmless, but by learning what normal looks like, what normal sounds like, what normal smells like. Then they sleep inside that knowledge. Tonight, the horse does not pull against the rope. The dogs do not bark. No unfamiliar riders appear on the horizon. The wolves continue their distant conversation. The fire becomes a red glow beneath the ash. The wind passes softly over the grass, and somewhere on the old Comancheria, beneath a sky larger than any roof, a tired warrior closes his eyes. He listens once more. Everything sounds as it should. And for one more night, that is enough.